call to order the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting at 5:30 on February 5th. We got 4 items on the agenda. We have 19024, which is South Broadway reconstruction, 19025, updated sidewalk repair program, 19026, streetlights on Reagan Parkway, and 19027, flashing lights at crosswalks not at intersections. So we'll start with the South Broadway reconstruction. Take it away and tell us all that you found.
Yeah, this was my request here. We are preparing the plans for South Broadway. We did this project we applied for and to get a grant to help pay for a little more than a third of it. The 2 big issues with South Broadway that make it unique are the width of the street and the brick, obviously. The street right now is 20 foot wide, curb to curb, inside curb, 21 total. Our typical residential street is 24 foot, 25 with the curbs. We're planning on replacing it as is, unless council has an objection, but we did need to have confirmation that would be okay with council. So that's the first part. And the second part, I don't know if we want to talk about that first, but there's a lot of issues with the brick to go over.
I think we have to go over all of it before we decide which route we want to take with it.
Okay. As far as brick, I did pass out a summary of the cost of different options for the pavement. Bottom line, it's a lot more expensive to add the brick. I did our typical street section for a residential road would be 8 inches of concrete with base, aggregate base, and soil stabilization. For the pavement only is about $200,000. For brick, if we're going with the brick section, that jumps up to $433,000. And I took a stab at estimating for a stamped and dyed concrete, and I'm getting about $245,000 for that. So it is more for both options 2 and 3. Brick obviously is quite a bit more expensive.
And this is just the cost of the material?
No, this is installed. This is installed cost.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, if the stamped concrete looked like a good, if we thought the stamped concrete looked like a good alternative, okay, let's say we decided that, and you and I talked about this last week, I think, because when I looked at the crosswalks that you put in over there, they look really nice. I thought they were brick. You know, I mean, when you're just not close up, it's like, I thought, wow, we put in brick crosswalks. Right. If you put that street in, I guess I have 2 questions on it. If you put it in stamped concrete, dyed concrete, do you know, or do we know, would it hold up? You know, because we plow, and it is indented, I guess, because it's stamped. Would it hold up as well as if it was concrete? I mean, would it hold up, or would that?
Structurally, it should have a similar lifespan. But the problem's going to be, we've been warned, over time, that brick pattern wears down, specifically in the wheel path of vehicles, and then due to damage from plowing.
Right.
The actual performance of it should last just as long with similar maintenance, but it's not going to look as nice on, at the 10, 15, 20-year mark it does on day one.
When you say not look as nice, though, the wear down part, the colors in the concrete all the way.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so it would, in 15 or 20 years, it would the ridge lines, like the indentation, I guess, the definition of the brick-like. That's the part that would begin to look smooth.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it could chip as well. I mean, the islands where vehicle traffic doesn't cross over will stay nice because obviously it doesn't have the cutting edges. We use steel cutting edges on those plows, and they will wear the concrete down, leave rust marks, and tear away at that concrete, unfortunately.
Are there plans for the crosswalks right now? Like we don't put the blade down all the way over?
We put the blade down. Well, we're not salting there, but you're talking about a Smith Road where the crosswalks
Yes.
are, correct? Yeah. So we don't know those effects since the first winter of plowing and clearing those streets. So we don't have that long-term effect yet.
So my second question, I guess, is if we said we like If we said, well, let's go with the stamped concrete.
Mhm.
What do you do about the referendum, what do you do then in relationship to the referendum that speaks to brick, not to
Well,
stamped
that,
concrete?
yeah, that's something Greg probably better comment on, but I pulled out, and when we talked about this last, right now, the property owners really have the authority to decide. The way it's written in our ordinances, it has to be brick,
Right.
unless 60% of them submit a petition saying they want another type of pavement. I guess the only way to get around that, if you wanted to, is to change the ordinance. I don't- It was a referendum, though, I think.
It was a referendum.
Actually, no, I take that back. It was a referendum, but council ultimately decided to pass their own ordinance, which kind of mirrored the language. I remember that, yeah, I'm looking at, it was like 20-some different ordinances that were passed regarding this back in the day.
But with all due respect, I'm not speaking for Mr. Huber, but if it was passed with a referendum, to undo it would take a citizen referendum as
Right.
well.
So my thinking, though, is if to do it not as brick, you have to go and get that, is it 60%?
60%,
60% of
yeah.
the property owners.
Mhm.
What, we can't really make that decision, we couldn't make a decision tonight. I mean, if we said, okay, let's do it in stamped concrete, we're not gonna make that decision.
The only decision we could make is to do it all in brick, and that,
The only one we could make is say, let's do it all in brick.
I mentioned to Paul before the meeting, I think tonight, we'll talk about the issues, but the next step is really organizing a meeting of the property owners and laying this all out and kind of getting their feel. I know we've had a couple contact us, because they know this is coming, and they have expressed they don't want brick at all. That's only a couple out of, I think there's 30 property owners, so I don't know if that's a majority or just a couple, but we need to get their pulse here on this.
Yeah, question if I can, Mr. Chairman. In the earlier discussions, we talked about if the property owners did 60% come back and said that they wanted a brick, were we able to assess them for that additional cost?
Yeah, the 60% is that they want something other than brick. Right now, it is going to be brick. But, yeah, council has the authority to assess as much as we want, the whole project or whatever the difference in cost is. That's why in that estimate there, I put the cost per property owner, the additional cost to add the brick or to do the dyed concrete.
it's substantial.
You know,
It is.
my recollection, though, was that we did not assess when we put the brick in originally.
I don't think you did, but you always have the ability to.
I know we have the ability to, but I was talking to somebody that was on city council back then, and they said to me they thought that we had assessed the property owners, but I was here as well, and I don't recall if we ever did, because as we've talked as a council, we keep saying, I mean, we've said many times, we've never assessed anybody when we've replaced a street. I mean, I think we've said that frequently. But then this council person told me just last week that he thought we had assessed for that brick, but I'd never heard that, and I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I don't think we did. I guess I could double check that, but I don't think it was assessed.
Okay. So what are we actually deciding?
So I guess we have to decide tonight whether we're gonna do brick or we're gonna do an alternative, or we would like to do an alternative, and then we've got to take that to the homeowners. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I think the first, I just make sure you're all okay with the 21-foot street, 20-foot curb to curb. It's replacing what's there. It doesn't change anything.
And they're grandfathered in,
Which.
right, because,
Yeah, they are grandfathered in, but it prohibits parking because of the width of the street.
right.
And we have a number of streets, North Jefferson is another one, North Elmwood is another one, because if the street isn't by law a certain width, then you can't have parking.
South Harmony.
I mean, I think that that's, I don't know, I would imagine we'd leave it the same way.
I mean, unless the property owners had a problem with it. I know because on both sides of the street, but beyond them, Route 3 going south and 57, there's no street parking either. So there is no street parking in that vicinity. So I don't know what the homeowners feel on that street. But other than that, I don't see a problem with that.
No.
I think the most recent reconstruction where we kept it the same was was South Harmony.
Yeah, 2 blocks of South Harmony.
Yes, yes.
Kept it to the 21 feet versus the 24.
I would suggest that since this is a special street circumstance, that we do have a discussion with the residents before any decision is made.
We
Just so we
do,
do get, pardon?
Maybe a discussion, maybe even a survey, send out, check the box.
Something like that, get,
We're gonna have a
to
meeting,
use your
but,
phrase, a pulse
yeah.
of where they are with that, and go from there. Because we may be talking about this, and the residents may want to just have the concrete, because they don't want to absorb the additional cost.
I think it should be, though, a letter, because it's not the residents, it's the property owner.
Right.
Okay, the property owner, right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and a bunch of those houses are, a lot of those houses are rentals.
Reynolds, right.
John?
Bill hit my point is that when this was passed, what was it, 60, would you, 80,
83-ish.
It was
Yeah.
81.
I mean, the character of the neighborhood has changed, of course, and I think at that time, brick was what everybody wanted. And I don't know if it was more cost-effective back then, maybe it was, maybe it's different now, but the character has changed, you're correct, and now there's a lot of rentals there. And I would imagine that the goal of the street has changed. Maybe, I don't know by the majority or not, but I'm sure the residents or the landowners or the property owners' expectations have changed. And with the advent of the stamped concrete, which provides a more cost-effective alternative that would at least look, if they want to keep that look for a longer period of time, I think brick is outdated now just because of the cost of the maintenance of the brick and the inability to plow it. It's just not feasible. Unless you just had so much money, you could just throw it, around what you wanted to. But I don't think we have that situation. But I think the idea would be just to find out what they would like to see. And my vote would be for stamped concrete, because that's something that's more manageable, proven, and it's a different option that's available today that was not available in '83.
I think it's similar to restoration of buildings, because if you look at when you're doing a perfect restoration, and you look at, you've got to use the exact same material, but if you look at a lot of the restorations on the square, things that have been replaced are not made out of wood. They're made out of some kind of another material that isn't going to rot or it's not going to rust. And I look at the street as the same, and I agree with you, in the same way. If you look at the doubling of the cost, if we could get it done in stamped concrete, because I think it simply is it's that appearance.
Keeps the historical aspect
It-
of the
it
road.
keeps it, but it doesn't, but we can do it with better ability to maintain it and at less cost.
And I'm with you, Bill. I thought those crosswalks were brick.
Yeah, well, our eyes aren't as good as they used to be. but-
So do we want to just put all these options, or do we, as a council, want to say, we like the idea of stamped concrete,
Give them all the options and say, this
or
is
the
the one we
option of,
prefer.
this is the one you paid for, this is the one we're willing to take
Can
care
we,
of?
are we agreeable, though, that if we
One thing that you gotta keep in mind is that if you just can't give the option, you want brick, you gotta say, my personal opinion, if you want brick, you're gonna pay for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Or potentially could be paying for it.
Yeah.
Let's
I mean, you're
approach
talking
them with,
doubling
like,
the amount of money, and I don't think that we could just say, okay, we got a couple $100,000 to throw at it.
here's the two plans, right? Here's council's plan, and then if you want to stick with it as it is, this is the amount that you'll be assessed.
But it takes 60% of the property owners would have to
Correct.
To
agree
that
to
be
do
something-
stamped concrete, because it's not brick.
Right, so if it has to be brick, then you gotta tell them, if it's gonna be brick, here's what you're gonna pay.
Yeah. I just think that's a better way, I think that's a good way. What do you think, Paul?
Mhm. Yeah, these are your options, and each option's gonna cost you.
I guess my other concern is if we do nothing, if we just do it in concrete, is when you look at the motivation to keep it in brick in the first place, it wasn't the 30 or 40 houses on the block that decided that. It was a city, it was people that don't drive on it and don't live on it voted on that referendum simply because of that appearance of the bricks, save that brick street, because there was only the two left. And I think that's why I also think then that the stamped, it gets us what we want and what the city wanted, really, but we get it at a better price and better maintenance.
Devil's advocate here, though, us paying a little bit more to stamp this concrete road, what's that to stop other homeowners from approaching us and saying they want stamped brick roads as well? Like, is there a way that we write that and approach that as historical streets, or how do we do that?
I think we aim at it, we have 2 brick streets in town, and if, they need to be maintained, we found this is a better method, and more economical, and limited to the, I mean, who's got a concrete street, and what are we gonna do, go start stamping them all?
If you could, I'd drive these.
Is that in the city? That's a good point.
I agree with you, bro.
The only thing that I have to add is I've had a small number of residents on a brick street, North Elmwood, saying that they would like us to pave it with concrete because they don't like the noise that the tires make going on with brick.
I love that.
So, well, some people do, some people don't. That's why I said a small number. Okay, so just something else to
Yeah.
consider
So,
when
are we
we're making
making,
our decision here.
are we making a motion here, or are we just going to survey a letter to the homeowners with like, are we doing 2 options or 3 options?
Let's give it all to them, but this option, and this is the cost. This option, and this is
And I
the
think you
cost.
also need to make sure they understand it takes 60% of them
Yeah.
to agree they want something different. Because if we don't get 60%, then it's gonna
I
be.
think it might be hard to do if you put 3 options and like people are voting.
No, I think you gotta have a meeting. You gotta give them that, so you gotta come to the meeting if you wanna have a voice, because you gotta have the discussion, you can't.
But you could do that for the discussion, but ultimately, you've got to contact all the
Well, yeah, but I
property
mean, you gotta
owners.
contact them all and say, we're gonna have a meeting to discuss this, and this directly affects your pocketbook, I think they'd show. I mean, I don't know, I'd show up.
Well, in that meeting, we could say, these are the options we're
Right.
exploring, and these are the costs, this is how it's gonna impact you.
Is
And
there,
then, the survey will be having to show up,
How do you formalize
and
60%?
then the discussion about it.
is
It's got to be 60% though of the number of property
one
owners.
vote per property?
If you've got 100 property owners, we need 60 of them.
Mhm.
I think there's 30.
What's 60% of 30?
18.
Oh.
6 times 3.
Bunch ahead there. What's
Should
your
we-
time, what's your time?
But 18 are gonna have to decide they want something different then.
Correct, yeah.
Otherwise, if they don't, then it goes with brick.
But then we can still assess.
Then you
and
could
decide
assess.
You could assess, right.
But we'd have to show that we have contacted and explained this to the 100, we've let all the 100% of the property owners know that this is what's happening, and they have that option, and and if they don't respond, and then they want, it has to be in brick, and then it has to be assessed, that's because they didn't respond, right?
Yeah, and reading the code, the mechanics of it, they have to submit a petition to the city saying they don't want the brick. So I don't, we're probably gonna have to hold their hand through that. Somebody's gonna have to,
Well, they could do that at the meeting.
Well, couldn't we have just a petition here if we
Yeah,
have
come
a
up and
meeting?
sign.
Yeah,
And they,
yeah.
if there's 18 of them, property owners that sign it,
Everybody seems on board with the idea of stamped concrete that I heard. Jim didn't speak, but are we on board with that idea that we would take care of that, or will we still assess for stamped concrete?
Are you guys willing to entertain assessed for anything at this point in time?
It's $45,000 more. Where else could the 45,000, well, on a bill of 200,000, that's what?
To maintain the character of the town?
remember, that's just the cost of the pavement, that's not the whole project. That does include pavement removal, storm sewers, water lines, the whole
Right.
project costs much more than that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And we-
45,000 on,
And we got a grant for,
the grant was for 470-some thousand.
right, so the
And that's
40,
gonna go towards the other,
the total
the
cost.
total
Right.
cost.
Yeah.
okay.
so the $45,000 is, I would think we could pay that additional.
I
Because
bet you could be able to say
it'd be
that.
really to our benefit, then we won't have to assess them for a brick street or making concrete.
I'd be in favor of that, keeping the historical aspect, but without picking up the 232,000.
Do we have to vote on anything?
I don't
or
know.
we just
This is my first time running a meeting, somebody point in the right direction.
You don't have to vote on it because you don't have the meeting yet.
Right, right. We need to.
Do we need a motion to send these things out to them and formalize a meeting? No.
But we have a pretty good.
But you're kind of directing us to put a letter together. I have to get with Greg, because we do have to follow potential assessment rules, but
Sure.
to send an official letter, probably registered mail to each property owner, advising them of a meeting and then telling them all the background, I think that's what you're telling us to do, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ask the people here, ask the other council, do we have a consensus then? or is it-
I believe so. Jim, how do you feel?
I'm okay with sending a letter and then having a meeting. I guess I want to talk a little bit more about what we're going to assess, because we haven't ever assessed anybody. And I don't know that it's completely their fault that somebody years ago, the whole city voted on
Voted
this.
on that, right.
It's not those 30 homeowners that voted on this.
Right, but I think we're in a situation where monetary, wise, if you put the vote to the whole city, I don't think they're gonna force us to spend another $250,000. So when there's an alternative that wasn't available, that is probably better.
I get that. I'm just saying, I'm not ready today to say absolutely they're getting assessed for it. I'd like to hear what their thoughts are. Because I know some of them like the brick streets, and I know somebody on there who feels like taking the brick streets out and doing cement is just gonna, it's already a very overcrowded street because people use it now to get off of 3. And they worry that once it's cement, there's gonna be even more people using it, which is gonna bring more traffic on their streets, so.
Well, I think to that point there, I think once we redo the pavement, regardless, it's gonna be smoother and easier to navigate, even if we put brick back on it. They're still gonna use the street.
But the brick does slow it down, people do avoid it because of the
Well,
brick.
because it's up and
Well,
down.
now it's
It's in
terrible.
bad shape. You smooth it out, and they'll be using it more, I think.
Again, I just want to hear what the residents really want, the 30 homeowners, what their thoughts are before but I'm okay with the idea of possibly using the stamped concrete as opposed to.
You think the letter we should mention, you may be forced to pay?
Yeah, I think they need to know that too.
Yes.
That's a
Like
potential.
surprises.
The
Right.
council
I
has
think council,
the right to
according
do
to the
that.
existing ordinance and name it, the council may be the key word, and council has discretion.
At their discretion.
Full transparency.
I think that will entice them to show up a little bit too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to show, I mean, they've been showing up, there's a couple of them that have been showing up at the ward meetings when we have the 3-4 meetings, and they're pretty opinionated on what they're looking for and what they want. So I'd like to hear from the other residents along there.
Bob, what do you think?
Me?
Yeah.
Stamped concrete sounds good, but you got to worry about the maintenance over the years with snowplows and stuff, just got to worry about that.
Is there a lot of cities around here that use stamped concrete?
No, not on public roadways, sometimes parkways and drives like that, but I had a real hard time finding even contractors that would give me a quote. There's very few, I ended up talking to, I think, 3 or 4 cities in Ohio that have brick streets. And that was pretty interesting. As far as the stamped concrete pavement, a full pavement, I didn't really find anybody that had done that in a public street.
If it was put back in brick and it was put back in right, if you did the 8 inches of concrete and put the brick down, would snow plowing do anything to the brick? Because, I mean, brick are brick, but they're not gonna stay perfectly probably.
My honest answer, if you're asking me, Bill, would be
Yes.
it'd be chipped up, because with frost, and we have over 200 frost and thaw cycles in a normal winter, so there's movement. Now, I don't know if they're placed, they may not move right away, but there's opportunity, unfortunately, for those blades to chip and rip.
Because I think the brick just sits on the concrete. I think the bricks just sit in the concrete.
Mhm.
They're not,
You pour the concrete, so you have an actual concrete roadway underneath, and it's a layer of sand that you.
and
put
then the
bricks
bricks
in.
sit there.
Mhm.
And so they do have that ability then
Potential
to,
move.
It's kinda like-
water gets in and move up and down, so you may end up with the same kind of maintenance,
We've got
Mhm.
some.
maintenance issue.
Yep.
You've seen the plans right now. I mean, their whole places, their product.
All right. Yeah.
Done pretty well.
Yeah.
Considering the weight of some of the streets.
Yeah.
We have to schedule a meeting then.
Yeah, it's good.
One thing I just want to throw out on the backside of that estimate, the city of Athens, when they redid their main street in brick, they reused all their bricks. So I thought I'd give it a try. I think I ended up showing about 39,000 in savings if we wanted to try and reuse some of the brick, which brings that cost down a little bit. But there are some concerns with that. Those brick, you can't put new and old together, they have to be separated, so we would have to have, because they're different thicknesses, we'd have to have like a couple hundred feet of old brick and then a couple hundred feet of new brick. I don't know if that's a concern or not. Something to consider, I don't know. If we do end up doing brick, I guess that'll be another topic. Do we want to try and reuse some to realize a little bit of savings or not?
Patrick, what's the useful life of a brick?
Well, talking to Athens, and there was another, I can't think of the name of it now, I should have brought it down. But they say they've been using their, it's not, it's not, nobody's 100%, they have to bring in some new brick. But they say there's some that's 100 years old that they have no problem reusing, haven't seen any reason not to.
Would, if we, when we get all this done, I mean, if we get, let's say we go with the stamped concrete, will that then, does that mean something to North Elmwood? I mean, does
I
what we
think
do
so,
to
yeah.
this street have an implication for this, on the other brick street?
I would-
Because I think they
ultimately,
were, I
that's-
think they were connected in that referendum.
Yeah.
right there.
Yes, they were.
Right.
What kind of timeline are we looking at for Elmwood of replacing their brick?
That's gonna be the next,
Yeah, it's not in the greatest of shape.
3 or 4 years, I think.
So, yeah, that's probably a big impact on them.
So, yeah, so what we decide, if we make a decision on Broadway, then that decision carries over to Elmwood?
What, does it referendum 60% of all brick streets? So you
The
need 60%
referendum
of
reads,
everything?
all streets or section of streets within the city currently surfaced in red brick.
So you gotta get Elmwood to come to the meeting.
Elmwood would be the same thing?
They're not separate. I don't think you're gonna do 60% for
Two
one
different
street
streets.
and 60% for another street.
It
It's
just says-
60% for all the streets.
Surfaced in red brick, all streets or sections of streets. It doesn't refer to Elmwood or Broadway.
So we have to get both to vote on.
Right, but when it talks about the 60%, is it 60% of the street or any street with brick?
Oh, 60% of the street you're working on.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Okay.
that was John's question.
Yeah.
He thought
It's
all in order.
So we just would do the same, just have to do the same thing.
Yeah, I
Same
thought
process,
that.
whatever process.
You gotta
we
be
do
clear,
to
Dan, gotta be
document
clear.
so we can use it.
Yeah.
Use
Did you-
it on
did you guys
street to
follow
land
that?
property.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 60% of the frontage requested repairs or reconstruction be done on, so it's per project.
And if a person or a group owns 2 properties, they get 2 votes.
I suppose so. I guess.
Okay.
That's right.
It's another great question, I think.
And Pat, you're just talking from Grant Street to Lafayette, right? You're
Correct,
not-
yeah.
We're not gonna do anything with the, down to South Street.
No, just the red brick section.
That's where the brick stops.
Yeah. Okay, I think you accomplished a lot.
Okay, so we're going to issue a letter to them and form a formalized date for everybody to hopefully come here and go over all this
Hash it out, yep.
with the community members. So that, table this, is that what we call that?
Do we have a time, do you have a timeline, Patrick, of when?
I'd
you-
like to schedule as soon as possible. I think we can get a letter out probably by the end of the week. I guess the important thing is picking a date that we want to meet. Would that be a council of the whole meeting, you think, or a streets committee?
I would do the whole probably, right? We're
I
all
think
here.
everybody, if we're gonna talk about possibly assessing them too.
Do you have a timeline, no, I mean, when you want to get this going?
We need to, I mean, we're under design now. The decision what pavement is can be a last minute detail. That
Okay.
doesn't affect too much, but we want to be out to bid in April, May, something like that.
Okay. So for this week, get the letter out. And set the date. We good on this? Move on. All right, updated sidewalk repair program. I asked for this. This is 19025. I asked for this one. I currently have, I live by some senior citizen homes, some apartment complexes that have people that have a hard time walking on the sidewalks because they are so old. And our current city plan is put out over till 2028. And when these people call me in my area, I have to tell them, oh, our sidewalks aren't on that plan to get adjusted until some of them 2025, 2022. And that seems like a problem that they are not accepting. They have to wait that many years. They can't get their wheelchairs over, stuff like that. that it needs to be fixed sooner. So I put it on the agenda today to talk about, do we want to try to increase the rate at which we do this instead of making it a decade's worth of work? Maybe making it a 4 or 5 year plan to try to get through the city. Yes, that means assessing the people and their sidewalks, but it makes our city more walkable, more usable for all people. I also put in there that I was interested in talking about the size. Right now, we have a rule that's a 2-inch gap before you are forced by the city to do anything. If it's above that, we're coming around assessing you now. If we wanted to tighten that up, Wadsworth currently has 1 inch or ½ inch. I think it's ½ inch. I was reading through their
Yeah,
stuff.
they just lowered theirs, well, just in the last several years. It used to be 2-inch like ours. They got through their whole city and tightened it up to.
The mayor sent me a letter saying Mr. Huber didn't like that idea while we're in the middle of this, which to me that makes sense. We've already started part of this construction. That would be confusing to those homes that we've already gone and assessed to come back then and say you're doing it again.
Right. So really, there's 3 concerns with Mr. Huber. One is that we've already started the program and are now changing the game plan midway. The other is that the rule that we selected to create the sidewalk ordinance was based on case law that went all the way to the Ohio Supreme Court. And we could lower the standard. We have a right as a city to lower the standard. But then what we're doing in essence is creating new case law that we may be okay with, but it's going to then affect other cities, possibly to their detriment, and he's not interested in taking that approach. In other words, it's going to have a ripple effect across the state. Instead of 2 inches, now it's 1 inch, ½ inch, or whatever, and some city that can't afford or doesn't have the engineering staff to do this, it would be problematic for them. The other thing is we reduced our engineering staff by a full-time person, and it takes a great deal of staff time to go out and measure each of these, mark them with paint, identify which pads are okay, which are not. If the city is notified of some of these, and there's problem areas for people with walkers or strollers, whatever, what we generally do, if it does not meet the criteria yet for removal, is to put a little bit of cold patch and ramp it to at least make it safer for folks. And then there was a third one. Give me just one minute here.
I think you had 3.
I think that was 3.
Was it?
That was 3.
I think you did.
Okay.
But you can handle it.
No, I was thinking right when I was talking about losing the, there was a third. So we established this plan, and originally it wasn't 10 years. It was that each year we would go out in concentric circles from the square, and we started with the square because it was the oldest. And then we figured eventually we're going to get out to these areas that were built in the 80s and 90s, and the amounts of sidewalks will not be near as voluminous as they are in these older sections. And then Bill asked us to also take a look at curbs in areas that, in particular, are state roads, where the curbs had been worn away, where the street had continued to be paved, and now, instead of a 6-inch curb, if you had any curb at all, some none at all, some it was more like a ½ inch curb, which doesn't serve the purpose of a curb of keeping the cars on the road. So what was determined then was that 1 year we would do curbs, and then 1 year we would do sidewalks, and 1 year we would do curbs. So my question is, if we're going to shorten this gap with our limited staffing, are we going to do away with curbs and just do sidewalks? Or are we going to continue to try to do both? So, and I know you weren't here for all that, Eric.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to bring you up to speed as to the kind of the logic and the discussions that led us in the direction to get to where we are today. Now, in a perfect world, would we all like it done this summer?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Right, it's all about priorities, I get that. Is there a way that we could bring in some intern help and whatnot to get the ball moving a little bit? Because we're not actually doing these jobs per se, and we're not paying for them for the sidewalk wise.
Right.
Right?
No, I understand that.
So we're hiring people out for this usually, correct?
Correct.
It's
We
not city
hire,
workers doing this.
we have an annual concrete pavement general services contract, and one of the tasks that they do is our sidewalk program. So they're on basically retainer right now, until the end
But
of the
for
year.
fairness, that's to replace the concrete.
Mhm.
That's not to assess all of the areas that need to be
Yeah.
taken care of and marking them, and then getting the whole list of addresses for the homeowners and the letters to notify them. There's a lot of administrative processes before you start taking the concrete out and putting it in.
I would not be in favor of changing it at this time, but the mayor brought up a good point that if you have constituents that there is a designated area that is, is troublesome, that the city has in the past and will continue to go out and try to repair those until they come up on the list of.
Oh, I see the black patches, and I have little kids, so I take strollers everywhere around this town, and we go for walks constantly in the summer. Especially on the south side of town, these sidewalks are god-awful. And they're probably up to that 2-inch code, but every other one is.
Any better anywhere else.
Well, there are other cities that are better. So I do think I would like to see this move at a little faster pace. I don't know what we could do to help do that at all.
Yeah, we intentionally, the first couple of years, kept it small just because we knew there'd be a learning curve, and we had quite a bit of other projects going on. We could look at taking off, a bigger piece of the pie here. But as the mayor said, we did lose one of our full-time inspectors last year. But it's where, like this year, for instance, our guy's pretty much 100% on this at this time, except when it's 5 below, going out and assessing it, because there's no other projects going on. So I guess willing to try. I'd hate to overpromise, though, until we can see how much we can get accomplished here.
And then back to your question about the intern. The city has had interns in the past, paid interns through the engineering department, but at least last year, if not the last 2 years, we've had trouble getting an intern, finding somebody willing and capable of devoting the time that we.
I think one thing to consider is it's sort of like the South Broadway thing, when people raise the issue about it's taking too long, is when we started to talk about the sidewalk program, the complexity, once we even came up with an agreement about how to do it, and the complexity, the details of, that it had to be inspected and you had to send the letters, the complexity of some of the things, I think it took a year or two before we really got it going, because to kind of figure out how we were going to do it, because we hadn't done it. And so I think it's important, because it's a public meeting, to understand there's been a great deal of progress made, through the program in this incremental fashion. And I know that when, because you're right, the south end of town, there's a lot of really bad sidewalks. But when I found, whenever I called in or pointed one out, that there's a problem with one, if it's one or two in particular, the city comes out and, and makes the adjustment, whether it's whatever they need to do to make it so it's not quite so bad. And, I wish it would go quicker, I wish it would go quicker too, but then I also am very much in favor of that curb program, because that's kind of part and parcel of that streetscape and what the streetscape's supposed to be.
Does the curb program go along the same timeline as this? That is basically.
No, we did, 2 years ago, we did the curbs on East Washington and some on South Court. This year, we're going to be doing curbs on East Liberty.
So the curbs are every other year, and the
Yeah.
sidewalks are the years in between.
Okay.
And if I could just share one more thing with you, I forgot that when I was checked. So sometimes the sidewalk settles, and then we ramp it. Other times, we go out and find out that one of our trees
All right.
actually caused it. If that's the case, we take a look at the tree, can we grind the roots, can we reset it? And of course, that's all at our expense, city expense. We don't affect the homeowners at all with that, and we don't wait for those. But Again, sometimes it's on a case-by-case basis. Somebody reports one to us. Even if we're not doing that area, we go out and check that right away, because now we're on notice. If somebody gets hurt, we're responsible. Or other times, it's because it's within the identified areas, so then the forestry department will go out before the letters are sent to the homeowner. So that's just kind of another step in the process. And were any of these that are marked now with paint affected because of our tree program? And if so, what do we need to do to correct it? So maybe if you have, for argument's sake, you have 4 or 5 slabs, but 1 or 2 of them are the city responsibility and the rest of the homeowner, then the letter would be adjusted with that, and then our forestry staff would take care of the other ones.
Sometimes the tree actually has to come out.
Yes.
Try to avoid that when we can, especially if it's a healthy tree, but sometimes Jansen gives it the death sentence.
Yeah, a lot of times there's, the last round we did, we had to remove 13 relatively mature trees because there was no other solution to replacing the sidewalk and the tree being in a safe, being left in a manner in which it's not going to pose a hazard to the public after we've ground out all those roots within, close proximity to the trunk itself. So on some areas, where we have wider streets, wider right-of-way, we can reroute the sidewalk around, we can do it in front, but in certain situations, we're removing trees because we have to get the sidewalk back in. So that's just another piece to it. And in a lot of these areas where we've claimed responsibility for the sidewalk, it makes it a little bit more cumbersome to replace the concrete because we have to pull out the concrete, then we get our forestry department in to grind the tree roots, clean up the grindings, then put in the aggregate, pour the concrete. So there's a lot of steps to it for being such a small problem in relation to, one property.
So I'm getting a no. I said, so I'm getting a no.
Well, okay, I was just going to go back to the curbs. I've got a family member who owns a property on East Washington, and she's gone through the curbs and she's gone through the sidewalk thing, and it's a vast improvement. I would hate to see the curbs fall by the wayside for this moving the sidewalk a little bit faster. But I know in 2 circumstances, I notified Pat of a large discrepancy in the concrete of the sidewalks, and within 48 hours, the crew had them fixed, or patched, so to make it safe to travel on.
Are we assessing for curbs too? Or is it
No.
just sidewalks?
Mhm.
That's us.
The curbs on those streets haven't been, the original curbs on the streets, like the Paul's
Well,
talking about, were
Washington.
put in around 1920.
Yeah.
And had never been replaced, so not only do they wear out because the stone they were, but all that paving that's gone.
My curb is like this,
Well,
which
you
is
see,
broken, yeah.
as soon as you leave council, maybe we'll do your street.
Okay, so then, what do I do here?
Let's move on.
Turn the page. Streetlights on Reagan Parkway. This is one that has been talked about frequently before, keeps moving on, but we found out that we cannot use any sort of grant money from the bike trail that we were building to put in any of these additional lights. So the question here is, do we still want to go ahead and do anything about these lights on our own? We have different options, with the lights that we could buy and whatnot. From what I've been told, this has been a constant conversation.
Can I ask you a history question first before people went? When I built my house in '87, Reagan Parkway was a line on a map. It was called Chesapeake. But it didn't exist. And why was the street built without streetlights? From approximately Ashwood west.
What year was it?
92 to 94.
The first section of East Reagan was built in '89, second section was like '92,
Okay.
the third section was '95. I was only here for the third section, so I'm not sure.
Okay. I was just curious why it was never built to begin with, without streetlights.
Yeah, we have a few of those. I was a lieutenant at the police department when the last one was built, so I was not involved in any of those discussions, but Hillview Way from Huntington Street to
Okay.
Court Street has no lights at all. This section of the East Reagan Parkway, and there's at least a third one, but right now the name escapes me. So, I don't think that any of the administration was here when those things transpired. I can't explain how it happened. You are exactly right, that generally when a residential or a new street was there, that the developer was required to put sidewalks, infrastructure, lights, the whole 9 yards, and somehow this one was not done. I think we committed in the board meetings that we've had that we would get lights on this section. Originally, we thought we could take the mast arms from the Court Street project, knowing we were going to put decorative lights up and just transplant them over there. But then we found out that those lights were actually attached to utility poles and not individual mast arms. And the power over here is all underground, and there is no utility poles to attach them to. The other thing we have is on the area closest to 3, from Ashwood to 3, the lights that are there are on poles. The area from Ashwood, or no, that's missing. The area from Court Street, because of our new project, to Jefferson has the decorative lights. So no matter what we put between, it's not going to match one end or the other. So my suggestion to Patrick was to look for the most economical resolve, because we know we want to have the lights. Is it the decorative ones? Is it the ones on poles? And how can we get this done for the least expense for the city? I think you have that data, right?
Yeah, a little bit of history for Paul Witt. I found a memo that we wrote back in 1999 about this issue, 20 years ago now.
Wow.
We're still talking about it. Yeah, I did, basically I narrowed it down to 2 types of light. I know Eric mentioned the lights that ODOT put on 42. I didn't really cost those out. Those are really expensive. But the other lights, the Cobra head, which would be similar to what's between Ashwood and Route 3, I'm coming up with the price of about $175,000 to do all the way from Court to Ashwood with those Cobra heads. For the Colonials, they're cheaper, a lot cheaper, but you actually have to put more in because they're not as tall. The light distribution is much. So you do. I had 28 Cobra headlights going in. We need 35 Colonials. Even with 35, though, it's still cheaper. It's going to be in the $125,000 to $150,000 range.
Is that with running the lines too, or just buying the lights?
No, that's everything. That's
Okay.
lights. I added power service costs.
What's your operating cost?
Operating costs should be very little. These will all be LED. So yeah, it will be a different light than what's on. It'll look the same except for the actual light that's cast from it, because these will be LED as opposed to those that are high-pressure sodium.
Are we going to be charged the same amount for the high pressure, as the high pressure sodium for LED lights from CEI?
Edison? No, we won't. They have changed their policy.
Okay.
They used to give us a per pole cost per month. Now we have put in meters everywhere, which is good for us here because those meters are show very little usage.
Okay, good.
Sounds like a good idea.
And Patrick, I'd asked you before about the solar lights.
Mhm.
Were you able to check into that at all, or?
Yeah, we found that, well, our next topic, we're going to be talking about a solar light for the flashing lights. But I just couldn't find anyone that would give us a fee for Northern Ohio for a light that's on all the time.
You're saying no?
They suck.
Yeah, I was going to say, Northern Ohio solar lights for
Trust me,
security.
I said with the
safety, no.
engineers, that technology for street light isn't there, it's not ready yet.
Okay.
We won't touch it.
Okay.
Is there a reason why it's been postponed so many times? Is it just that not wanting to pay the money, or what was the?
I think so, and hoping that we could find a grant. Originally, the reason I wrote that memo, that council was considering assessing property owners for it, and they decided not to. But yeah, it just,
And for years, we thought, I mean, this project on Court Street was
Right.
pending for how? You told me. that
15
time?
years, yeah.
15 years, so for
Yeah.
15 years, we're thinking, okay, as soon as we do it, we'll take those lights and move them over, and then we get to the end and find out we don't have a pole to put them on.
You can't, so.
Yeah, yeah,
That
that's
whole
not gonna
time
work.
we're promising people that we're gonna do this.
Well, by waiting, you're gonna get really cool LED lights instead of the high pressure.
Yeah,
So there you go.
Yeah.
It's gonna
At
cost
a
you a
much
lot
lower
less.
cost.
than it's worth operating.
So, what is your feeling on this? Do you wanna move forward with this?
I like the idea of having some sort of colonial type lamp post. It fits in with the general area, general residential area. I know back in Forest Meadows, the majority of the newer section has those types of lights. I think that we should have some sort of lighting along there. I walk around there occasionally. At nighttime, it does get pretty dark. I'd like to see some sort of lighting.
I would just say, those taller Cobra headlights on the existing section, those are there, well, there's a path there now, but, those are there to illuminate the roadway. This other section, you're getting closer to Court Street. I don't know that the roadway needs to be any more illuminated, but we have a path for part of it now, and we will have, if we get this grant, have a path all the way. I think you want to illuminate the path, which is what these would do.
Who's the Cobra head, you're saying, or the?
No, the Colonial.
Colonial, okay, yeah.
And most of the Cobra heads are stop where the residential area starts.
Right.
Coming from 3 to.
Right.
Yeah, so that, I like the colonial.
So do we want to do a motion to,
Let me throw something else out. Should we tie this to if and when we get the grant money for that path? And see what happens with that, or do we just want to go ahead and?
Would hate to tear it up.
It would be close.
Yeah.
so then, yeah, I
Maybe
guess-
we could do from Larkin's to Ashwood and see how,
When is that supposed to be put in?
I don't know, when did we find out about that?
October is when the grant's awarded.
Oh, October.
So, I'd go ahead.
Want to go ahead with maybe illuminating the existing path, just Ashwood to Larkin's?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then-
Okay.
Pat, what side of the road?
Would there be any cost
It'd have
benefit?
to be on the path side.
Would there be any cost benefit to doing the whole thing but we time it such that we start in where the existing path is, and then by the time they finish putting in the new path, we can just move on up the road?
If we bid it all as one, I'm sure there's a bit of economy of scale, you get some savings.
Okay.
But I don't know that we won't know if we're getting the grant till October, it sounds like.
Okay, so if we would agree to do something today, how soon, what would be the soonest that the project would start?
Well, I'm sure we could have this going in the summer. It's not a very difficult thing to
Okay.
design and put together.
So I'm just throwing, if we can save, a couple $1,000s here and there, help pay for the electric bill for a couple of months. That's all. But, Jensen, what do you think our chances are for getting that grant?
It's pretty competitive. I know Brunswick is also applying for the same grant, but we have a pretty strong application together.
Okay, all right, so,
If we wait till October,
Won't be done.
you won't get done this year, then
No.
it'd be,
okay.
I hate to lose the inertia.
Yeah.
So if we did, for argument's sake, if we did the lights from where they end now to Jefferson Street.
To Ashwood.
Well, from Ashwood to Jefferson.
No,
Right.
Ashwood to Larkin's.
Larkin's West.
I'm saying if we did the whole thing and then we do the path, is that going to adversely affect what we did with the lights?
It could, yeah.
It's going to be problematic.
I mean, we can, I guess I probably need to look at it to see what kind of impacts the path would have on.
Right. Because, I mean, if we can get it all done and it's cheaper to do it all at once, that makes sense. But if it's going to cause a problem when we go to put the path in, because now we have these lights and underground wires and everything there, then we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot, so we have to balance it.
Yeah,
out, I think.
that's what deal was there.
Do
So
you,
is it,
We don't know the answers to those yet.
okay, so let me ask, if you sit down and work your magic as an engineer, then you can say, yeah, we can do this
Engineering.
this way.
Engineering.
Engineer.
No matter.
You know, if we give you, a couple of weeks to
Sure.
look at it and say, if we do it this way, we can accomplish it, would that, maybe we want to table this too until
if you can
he
get
has
some
a
more
chance to look
answer,
at
I'd be
it?
Sure.
To get the plans a little more consolidated or firmed up.
correct. Table this for a couple weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
And the last one is flashing lights at crosswalks, not at intersections. So we're putting these flashing lights, we got a grant for those around the square. But we've got a couple crosswalks in the town that are not on the square. Two of them being right by schools. There's one on Reagan Parkway, and the other is on Sturbridge? Sturbridge, by schools. And there's one, yeah, A Middle School. There's also a middle-of-the-road crosswalk on 18 at AI Root, the factory, the candle place, yeah. Is there one more?
There is 4. There's one right outside our building here on Elmwood to go to the court.
Is that one of the 4?
Oh, Highland Drive too.
What's that?
There's one on Elmwood, right outside our
Yeah.
door here.
So we have 5. So
Forgot about that
Highland
one.
Drive is right where Nottingham comes over, because we needed access to get the folks over to the improved sidewalk to go down to the shopping center and across to Drug Mart and those things. The sidewalk was not as conducive on the south side of the road as it was with the north side.
And Pat just brought this up to me, and I thought it was worth talking about, especially the two by the schools. Do we want to invest in these lights so people don't have problems seeing the children crossing, especially in the morning time? But I just got emails back from both principals at the school today, and both of them said that they don't really see it that much as an issue. But then they asked me to talk to Mr. Jim Shields here to get his opinion on it, because he always made sure there were crossing guards and whatnot there.
I was just gonna say, anytime I've gone past the one on Reagan Parkway during school hours, there's a crossing guard there.
Yeah, we made a commitment when we built that there that we would have a crossing guard. And then what I pushed for a long time, which is there now, is that piece of cement that gets you from the apartments, because they would cross in the grass there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will always have a crossing guard at Northrop there. That's a commitment we made when
Oh,
we
they
built the
didn't take
building.
care of that, then that's, so we're done with that.
But we do not have one, Jim, at AI Root.
No, just because the students are older.
Yes.
And the principal,
It's middle school.
the principal finally got back to me and said that it was not an issue for them. They've not had any issues with traffic there.
Well, there's issues with traffic because everybody drops their child off instead of children walking.
Well, with the crosswalk is what
Traffic is
There's a
around,
huge
it's right
traffic
across.
issue.
Traffic is clogged, so it's not.
Yeah, don't go through there at 8:30.
Or 2:45.
Well, the other ones are, do we want to do those for the other places? I mean, for me, the priority was obviously kids using them the most,
Right.
right? And if they're not a problem for the kids, are these other ones really a problem we want to invest in? Because you sent me how much it would cost.
They're about 8,000 each, so for 2 would be 16,000 per location.
To do both sides of the road.
All 6
I
cars.
think-
that go by.
There's another one at Lafayette Circle, I just remembered.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now, it does have a flashing light when you're going southbound. I don't know if it does. I'm sorry, when you're going towards Baxter Street, I don't know if it does coming the other way or not.
I don't remember either.
There, I believe there is one each way. Now, we did, when we redrew the redistrict, we made sure there was no students that had to cross Lafayette Road anymore.
Correct.
Because we always had a crossing guard there too until we.
Yes.
So we switched it so that no students have to cross 57, none have to cross 3 of these elementary ones.
I think that when we talked about doing this, I think a lot of it was centered on the square. It was because of the park, it was because of the volume of people in parked cars.
Yeah.
That there were so many people crossing, and that the crosswalks were somewhat disguised, because camouflaged by the cars that park. There's a car and then the crosswalks in between, and it was to better identify that people are going to step out of that crosswalk.
Right.
I mean, I think that's what
Yes.
we were.
And if we're going to light the one at Reagan too, it's definitely going to help as well, seeing kids go to that crosswalk, so I think I'm good now. schools don't want it anymore?
Well, I know there's only about, maybe, there's not as many students that come from the apartments. I think she told me there's less than 10 that she crosses there. And school doesn't start till 8:45, so they're really not coming till after 8, and by that time in the morning, it's much
Yeah,
later.
regardless of time of year. it's
Yes.
daylight.
Yes.
Remember that crosswalk isn't closed, it's open all day, not just when school's coming.
Right,
too.
right, right.
You know,
But I can honestly say, other than school in and out times, I don't think I've seen anybody using that crosswalk. They'll cross any place but the crosswalk.
Yes.
It's not a big part, but.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, if it's okay with you, I think we try these 4 on the square, four locations on the square, see how they work out, see what the maintenance is, the upkeep of them, and if we don't have a problem, then we don't. But if we do, then we have some basis to judge cost.
And motion to close?
I'd like to thank you, Patrick, though, and the administration for the work they've done on South Broadway.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
because we got a one block road that took a lot of, it's a lot of work to try to figure out how to do this, and it's been, that work has been helpful. Hopefully it'll pay off so that we can get this done, but we couldn't have done it without all that effort that you put into it. Appreciate that work. Yeah, good.
I agree.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Eric.
Did I say something? Meeting adjourned.
Leave.